Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Read Aloud for Lesson 4.03, Going Places. Early American inventors built practical, labor-saving devices. They needed to. The United States had a lot of land and abundant resources, but it was lacking in human labor. With the establishment of the factory system, along with inventions such as mechanized looms and the steam engine, American industry was born. Americans emphasize efficiency and uniformity. But for the American economy to become a true market economy, improvements in transportation were needed to move goods quickly and inexpensively. With canals, turnpikes, and steamboats, the United States experienced dramatic economic growth. The last element of the American Industrial Revolution was communication. Goals for the lesson. I'm just going to skip the first one, go down to the second. Explain how major innovations in transportation in the early 19th century changed travel and trade. Recognize the impact of Morse's telegraph on communication. Assess the impact of innovations in transportation and communication on everyday life in the United States. And recognize the significance of Morse's telegraph in revolutionizing communication. Okay, don't forget to grab your reading guide and lesson answer key, and you also see there's another document, the Transportation Revolution, and let's get started. Oops, my cat just jumped on the computer, and let's fix that up. Pages 277 through 279, so a shorter reading today. Complete the reading guide, complete the Transportation Revolution sheet, read the Chapter 11 highlights, and then take the 4.03 quiz. So let's start with page 277, starting with the start of a communications revolution. The American Industrial Revolution progressed in part because of improvements in transportation, but perhaps even more because of innovations in communications. In a country so big, with communities spread so far apart, improving communications had long been a priority. Even before the Revolution, Benjamin Franklin had helped develop a postal system that bound the colonies together and provided rural colonists with news of the day. After the War of 1812, under the leadership of John C. Calhoun, the War Department pushed for improvements to facilitate military communications. By 1831, a corps of 8,700 postmasters presided over a system that mailed more than 14 million letters and 16 million newspapers annually. Newspapers, not personal mail, made up the bulk of what mail carriers delivered. After the New York Sun started selling its newspapers for a mere penny in 1833, demand for newspapers rose around the country. In a land with high literacy rates, Americans everywhere wanted to read daily about events in the world, as well as information concerning the prices of crops and consumer goods. Efficient as it was, the postal system could only deliver information as fast as a horse could gallop or a ship could sail. Canals and railroads shortened the time it took to transmit information, but it still took days, weeks, or even months before some places received news. Sometimes the communications gap could have a major effect on public affairs. When Andrew Jackson defeated the British in the Battle of New Orleans in January 1815, he had no idea that the United States and England had signed a peace treaty 2 weeks earlier, because news of the armistice had not yet reached him. Samuel Morse and the telegraph. Americans craved their newspapers, but what if the news could be delivered without paper? Ever since the early 1800s, scientists have been tinkering with electricity, and some proposed that electric signals might be sent over wires. In 1831, the American physicist Joseph Henry announced he had developed a way to send an electric current over long distance through wire. The man who made electric communication a reality, however, was not a scientist at all. He was an artist. Samuel F.B. Morse grew up the son of a minister in Charlestown, Massachusetts. His strict Calvinist father instilled in his son a powerful sense of purpose and a love of scientific inquiry. In addition to leading the local Congregational church, Morse's father wrote a number of very popular geography books. When he sent his son Samuel off to school, he instructed him, behave decently at breakfast, go regularly and seasonably to the academy. While there, in study hours, attend to your lessons and get it thoroughly and try to be the best scholar in your class. This proved to be wishful thinking. Samuel was not a good student, but he did discover a talent for painting. His portrait of President Monroe brought him fame as an artist. He helped found the National Academy of Design in 1825, and he might have gone down in history for his art had he not stumbled upon the idea of an electric telegraph in 1832. His concept was simple. Morse designed a device that could send pulses of electricity across wires and thus enable people to communicate across great distances. Even more important, he invented a code, which today we know as Morse code, for sending messages over the wire. In Morse's system, the machine's operator pressed a key either in short or long taps. A short tap was a dot, a long tap was a dash. Morse gave each letter and number its own combination of dots and dashes, with the most common letters having the simpler patterns. The electronic message of dots and dashes instantaneously traveled by wire to another operator who received it on another machine and decoded the dots and dashes. On May 24, 1844, Morse went to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate his invention. From the Supreme Court building, he tapped out the message, "What hath God wrought," and ascended along the lightning line to a similar device in Baltimore, 35 miles away. Very soon, the same message came back. A brave new world of instant communication was born. So like the first text message, almost. The telegraph changed the way Americans delivered and received news and information. Wires were strung slowly at first as people figured out ways to use Morse's invention. But within 10 years of Morse's first demonstration, 23,000 miles of wire crackled with messages. Most towns from Boston, Massachusetts to Springfield, Illinois had telegraph offices, which became buzzing hubs of communication. This web of telegraph lines tied the young nation together, linking remote frontier settlements with cities back east. Hearing the news as it happened made Americans feel connected to distant events. Newspapers could get information by telegraph and quickly publish it for their readers. Railroads used the telegraph to find out where their trains were and whether they were running on time. Quicker communications helped banking and businesses to boom. Companies in one state could communicate by telegraph with companies in other states. Soon telegraph wires linked countries around the world. Companies set up telegraph lines in England, Germany, Russia, and other nations. In 1850, an underwater telegraph cable was laid across the English Channel, connecting Great Britain with the rest of Europe. 16 years later, a British steamship succeeded in laying a telegraph cable across the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean between Iceland and Newfoundland, Canada. By the time Samuel Morse died in 1872, more than 650,000 miles of wire had been strung, including 30,000 miles of underwater cable. A person in California could write a telegraph message to someone in India. A London newspaper boldly declared, "Time itself is telegraphed out of existence." Life in the industrialized market economy. In 1800, most Americans still lived in a subsistence economy. A farm family in western New York still produced most of what it consumed. The men in the family harvested small quantities of wheat and corn, while the women tended to chickens and hogs, which were later butchered for food. Mothers and daughters wove cloth to make rough farm clothes. They churned their own butter and made their own candles. Husbands and fathers built rough-hewn log cabins from scratch. There was little point in finding new and innovative ways to produce surplus crops or livestock, for there was no way to sell the surplus at market. But with the arrival of a better transportation system, including new roads, canals, steamboats, and railways, farmers in western New York and elsewhere entered into a new way of life. They became part of a market economy. They began to specialize in growing one or two crops. In order to produce larger surpluses, they invested in new farm equipment, such as steel plows. In the old days, farmers worked until they produced enough to survive. Now, the more they produced, the more they could buy. This motivated farmers to try to produce more and produce it more efficiently. On canals and fast turnpikes, produce from western farms moved east and into the orbit of the global economy. Steamships and railroads greatly increased the volume of crops sent to market and correspondingly increased the amount of farmland under cultivation. With the cash they earned on the market, American farm families bought factory-made clothes, candles, and furnishings, the same items they had once made on the farm. There were plenty of manufactured goods available to buy, as Americans harnessed water, steam, coal, and electricity to marvelous effects in the early 19th century. Water-powered looms spewed out cloth, while unfortunately increasing the demand for slave-grown cotton. Factories using interchangeable parts manufactured consumer items formerly made at home. The electric telegraph linked Americans who lived many miles apart. As large cities sprang up along canals and rivers, many people moved and relocated, some to factory towns such as Lowell, Massachusetts, which pumped out cheap consumer products to the entire world. Port cities like New York and Boston expanded to handle the new influx of goods and immigrants. Pioneers swarmed west, knowing they could reach distant markets and turn a profit. Economic opportunity, quick and easy transportation, and lightning-fast communication combined to close the gap between the formerly backwater United States of America. The growing marketplace compelled Americans to begin to think less locally and more globally. If Europe experienced an economic downturn, then buyers in London would reduce their purchases of American wheat and cotton. If there was less foreign demand for American wheat and cotton, the merchants in New York would buy less of it from farmers in western New York or South Carolina lowcountry. What happened thousands of miles away could now affect life on the American frontier. The world was becoming a more complex place, as we shall see in the following chapters. Complexity could lead to confusion and anxiety. For better or worse, America was becoming a more modern economy. All right, so we completed the reading, so don't forget to complete your reading guide sheets and check your answers with lesson answer key. And let's look here. When Andrew Jackson defeated the British at the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, he had no idea the United States and England had signed a peace treaty several weeks earlier. Why do you think this was so? If you guessed slow communications, you're correct. Information at that time could only be delivered as fast as a horse could gallop or a ship could sail. But what if people could communicate instantaneously across long distances? Do you think this would be a revolution in communications? Follow directions to continue the lesson. And that's on your study guides. Okay, let's look at the Chapter 11 highlights. The Industrial Revolution, which began in England's textile industry in the late 1700s, changed American life dramatically after the War of 1812. American inventors used scientific knowledge for practical labor-saving purposes because the United States was experiencing shortages in human labor. American businessmen and inventors borrowed from British innovations, but improved upon them by emphasizing efficiency, uniformity, and streamlining. Geography played a role in determining where new industries developed in the United States, most notably the dramatic growth of textile and other industries in New England. Life in the textile factories in New England for young women in the early 1800s posed health and safety risks, but also empowered them. Major innovations in transportation in the early 1800s including turnpikes, canals, steamboats, and railroads. These new models of transportation helped the American economy grow and supported population shifts. The invention of use of the telegraph revolutionized communication by allowing people to exchange information instantaneously over long distances. And don't forget to take your quiz. And if you have time, go on beyond the lesson and look more into Samuel Morse and the telegraph. So good luck, everyone, and catch you in the next Read Aloud. Bye-bye.